I'm Tom Southwell. I was one of the production illustrators on Blade Runner for 6 months in 1980 and 81. The first meetings that I had with Larry and David and Ridley were dominated by the specifics that Ridley had in mind for the certain graphics. He says, we need a lot of stuff. Illustrations and graphics and badges and neon signs and billboards and car graphics and things like that. And he kept saying he wanted it to look like heavy metal, the magazine. More or less what he was saying was it was very eclectic. There was stuff from every phase of art. He didn't want anything to look like it was done by the same guy. So there was a series of different qualities that were supposed to show up. And then every time that I tried to do something that was particularly modern or futuristic, he would try and push it a little further into the past so that it had a little bit more of an overlap. And it finally dawned on me that it wasn't making a utopia, we were making hell. And it was going to be beautiful despite this clash. Once I got on board, I just flew. I mean, I knew exactly what to do. I knew I could do anything as long as it was complex. I knew as long as it was eclectic and it didn't and nothing lined up in its a hodgepodge of everything. Once it's presentable or perfectly clean as finished art, they would then go in front of Larry Paul and David Snyder and Ridley Scott for approval. Now, what did happen frequently was I would do something and it would be approved to that degree, and then past that it would go to somebody else. It would either be aged down more or it would be altered in some way. They would, I mean, for instance, on Deckard's entry card to get into his apartment, I had done the block logo that Frank Lloyd Wright had done for the Innes house. I had put that on the card and then put arrows and which way it's supposed to go in the slot. And Ridley Scott said, can you put something on top like it was added to it? So we put an additional thing in red on top of that, and then that was laminated. And that sort of thing was happening all the time. I mean, there was always some way of making it more complex or more broken or used or scratched or more realistic. You know, I have some people come to me and say, you know, is this the way you did it or is this the way you did it? And I would have to say, well, I did it like this, but who's to say that the prop master wasn't asked to age it down or add this or put a sticker on top of that or, you know, do something else to it. I wasn't there from the time it was created to the time it got shot by Jordan Cronenweth's camera. On the Deckard card, the ID badge for the police department, we put a bunch of stuff that we clipped out of magazines, little snippets here, little thing there, and I was picturing that it was sort of like the kinds of things that they're doing now on dollar bills to make them difficult to reproduce, sort of the security devices. And in some cases, I mean, that VidFont card was intended to look like some sort of a mechanical thing that would only work going in a certain way, and it would have your ID, sort of like a smart card, you know, that has information that comes and goes. You know, every time you put it in, it writes on it, or take it out. So, I mean, I was sort of, I didn't invent it, but I sort of like was anticipating it coming. Early on, Sid Mead had done all these beautiful drawings in black and white of the noodle bar, and he had not done a color version of it. They were just these beautiful line drawings of it. And I was sitting in the art department with Larry, and he said, what are we going to call this place? Because I'm going to make a sign. And I said, well, it's white. I said, do you remember when you were a kid, we had a thing called the White Tower in New Rochelle, where I lived. He said, we had a place called White Castle in Chicago. And I said, same thing. It's the same thing. Yeah, they had these, it was like the predecessor of McDonald's. So the idea was that this was this little noodle bar that was with chain, obviously a chain, and I thought, well, it looks good white. So I pitched, how about the White Pagoda, you know, which is sort of like a White Castle, or White Dragon? And he liked the idea of the White Dragon. He said, oh, that's Asian, you know, it'll fit right in. And then, so I got my book of neon out, and they had a picture of a really good dragon. So I went ahead with that, and then they had two tongues, so it could go back and forth. And then this. The only color in the place was this china red, the green, and then this black and yellow outline that goes around it. And then with a bit of the food being displayed here on the menu, ghastly food that you really wouldn't want to eat. But then again, they had the noodle bar. One day, this parking meter design would come in that Sid Mead had done an illustration for, and that had gotten approved. And they wanted a sticker on that would have some kind of information. So I'm going to invent something, and then it's going to either get approved or not approved. And I don't think they've ever changed any of the words that I put in. And I even put a type line, I think, on most of the urban stuff that says Union printed in the new city. Never thinking that anybody would ever see it because we were going to be that far away from it. But the type of thing that was everywhere. I mean, his marching orders were, I want this movie dripping with bleeping graphics. And Ridley Scott knew that you're not going to be able to sit behind a car in traffic and not see 7 things of graphics on the back of every car. It's everywhere, and the whole world is going to be like that. And my walk, don't walk signs turned into walk now, walk now, walk now. And we're doing that now. You can go in LA or New York, and you could be standing on a corner and say, walk now. But we're learning to screen it out in our minds so that we can get through it all. But that was part of the plan, was to have it everywhere. Now, this was done in 1980 and 81 before the Macintosh had provided graphic artists with the basic tools to do graphics. But back then, I would do everything by hand. I would take a Sharpie pen, and I would draw my neon line, and then I would have the print turned into a white line on black by making it a photostat, a reverse, they call it. And then I would take a magic marker in color, and I would float the color on top of the line so that you could see the various colors that were going to be in it. And then a lot of the Japanese I would have translated. I would take a picture from the Ginza or a picture out of a Japanese graphics book, and I would have that translated into English. Or I would take a word in English like restaurant or cocktails or whatever, and then have that translated into Japanese. And then I would be able to present all the material in both languages. Now, I think the most fun one was for the Cuisinart, because I got to animate it. I would have the blade spinning, and then I'd have this tomato up at the top, and it would kind of travel down, and when it gets down into the bottom of the thing, it would be all these bouncing around little pieces. I saw that as being 20 feet high, and of course we couldn't afford 20 feet high. I think it's 4 feet or 6 feet high, and but they had a great deal of fun making that, and the Cuisinart people paid for the manufacture of that, and I think everybody was very grateful to get that in there. Ridley Scott brought in a book of German uniforms that had insignia and badges and things, and there was a German fascist quality that he'd like to have in the police force. I mean, most of the things that had graphics were the police uniforms, because I don't think I had anything on Deckard's costume, but there was a costume that was sort of like riot gear that they had masks and chest protectors and things like that. And one of the things that I had indicated that was following the German was the idea of the skulls, which could be used as badges for having scored certain hits, or there was a whole German army unit that used a skull as part of its insignia, and I thought a modern version of that would be suitable for what Ridley Scott was asking for. And then he also gave me a book on American Indian baskets and weavings and things, because there were some symbols in there that he thought could be useful, which for instance is the SS that we put on the back of the spinner as a kind of a chevron to say stay away because you'll get burned or something like that. And since I was going to do graphics that were made of a certain size, I needed to know exactly how big the space was on the vehicle. So I would go over to Gene Winfield's place with a great big piece of paper, and I would lay it over the car, and I would trace out where the windshield would go or where the wheel housing would go, and I would make myself a pattern. And then I would indicate how much space there was for a particular graphic, or where it would be, where it should go, or which ones are going to have to stretch. Like, for instance, the SS chevron that goes across the back of the car, I had to figure how stretchable is that thing going to have to be. Now, the 99S995, I believe everybody's entitled to interpret it any way they want. I thought it was like a 911, you know. It should be police 911, and then I started to lay it out. 911 didn't lay out particularly attractively because it's a big 9 and these little dinky ones. So what I did was I chose 99S because it was alphanumeric. It was more gibberish, and if you go to Mobius or these heavy metal things, you'll see a lot of things you don't understand, just gibberish of alphanumerics that take your mind away from it in some way. And that's sort of what I was going for there. I thought it looked more like a Mobius thing than, you know, just 3 numbers. One of the fun things for me was the magazine stand, and they need to be from the future. Ridley does not want to see any Vogue or Time magazines from right now. He wants all new magazines. So I looked at the script and saw, okay, this is the tough future. So my favorite one of all was the one that I had the most fun, which is Kill Weekly magazine. I had this very rough drawing of a Doberman Pinscher, I think it was, and the cover article is "Guard Dogs You Never Feed." You know, and we did other things. I mean, we had soft porn. There was Horn magazine, I believe, and we had a fashion magazine with which I thought was a clever idea, a hair neon. I think I did 11 covers, and we made them the exact size of existing magazines so that they could just wrap them around them. And they were very haphazardly done because we knew they were going to be deep background if seen at all. And I don't think they even show up. I would say that half the stuff that I did isn't on camera. I mean, if I could point there, I could find 150 things in the movie that I did and designed graphics for, but there's 150 things that I did that didn't show up. You know, and they aren't all things that just got nixed. They didn't like the design. It was just stuff that, you know, showed up in the deep background somewhere. I mean, I have to say, some of that stuff is just, we got to put something down, and you're grasping for straws, really. It's not in the script. You don't want to bother Ridley Scott with some minutia like that. You want to just, okay, here it is, and you present it, and he can say yay or nay, and it's got to move along quickly. You'd be surprised how fast we were going on this stuff. So I was busy, very, very busy, and I was going as rapidly as possible. But I got everything done, and it was a mammoth amount of work. So I mean, we all learned a lot. I mean, everybody's trying to live up to that kind of quality to this very day.
The fashion, the work and costume in Blade Runner was shockingly different.
I received the script and it read to me kind of like a detective story, almost like a film noir. Just kind of had that feeling and that grittiness. And so I was looking forward to that.
I had a marvelous costume designer, Charlie Node, and Michael's excellent, but Charlie Node was fundamentally the designer. And not enough acknowledgement is given to what Charles did.
Ridley asked if I would, mind working with someone else, and it was kind of a great treat because, we costume designers always work alone. We don't work in this country with partners. We're kind of just working in a vacuum until we were told by Ridley that the first location had been set, and that was Union Station. We found this beautiful mosaic tile work with geometric patterns on them. It was Mexican deco, and it was something that we then, pattern-wise, incorporated into all the designs of the film. Because Charles and I saw the film as a film noir, we were looking back to the detective stories of the 1940s. Charles wanted Harrison to be a gumshoe. He wanted him to be a private detective. And so what it was just kind of redefining what a futuristic trench coat would look like and what his one suit would look like, the suit he always wears and kind of lives in and is kind of creased. I did make 2 or 3 shirts for him, and he did have a couple ties, but it was always the same coat, and I believe always the same suit.
We gave him a reddish, almost Harris tweed, herringbone jacket with little lapels. I've still got his tie, which is a cross-printed, hand-printed tie. So it's like we hadn't gone too far. The trick with costume design like that is don't go too far.
I remember early on when Harrison was first cast, he didn't have very much to say. The only comment he had, the only request he had, was that he not wear a hat.
He said, I just did that. He saw the hat, this is it. And I went, oh, shit. And so we didn't do that.
He said, I just came off a long movie and I wore a hat through the entire thing, and if I don't, wear another hat for quite a while, it'll be fine with me.
The character, the haircut was it was a preemptive move on my part, and that is to say, I had my hair cut. And Ridley said, whoa, wait a second. I said, well, you want to wait a second, wait a couple weeks, then it'll grow out, but can't do anything now. I liked the haircut. I thought it was just enough of a break from what people were doing contemporarily. So it had an odd look to it.
She looked absolutely great, really special.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful woman. And the makeup just was who she was, really. The most perfect lips that I'd ever made up. And her hair was gorgeous, and Shirley, our hairstylist, did a wonderful job, gorgeous job on the hair.
Ridley's persistence with how the hair was. I mean, I actually wore my hair a little bit like the Blade Runner look, because we went over and over in makeup and hair tests to get the hair up and in front of the face, and how we ended up doing that was very much a trial and error.
Well, one of my favorite designers was a designer named Adrian. He was doing something called, I think he called it insertion, and what it was instead of using one piece of fabric to make a coat, for example, or a suit, he would take the fabric, or many fabrics, and turn them different ways so that the grain was going different ways or the pattern was going different ways, and also take different similar fabrics and put them together. When you see Rachel's clothes, there's either quilting or patterns made in that way. She had 2 or 3 suits and 2 or 3 coats. Of course, things that went underneath, like blouses. There's a scene at the piano where she's wearing a beautiful silk blouse that our seamstress Sakura sewed for hours and hours and hours, made out of different colors of Chinese silk.
We scrapped an idea, Ridley did, where they put a piece of tape around my legs and they greased up my legs.
Ridley was saying, what kind of, futuristic hose could we do for her? We came up with something that I thought would look great, and that was to tie a silk ribbon around the top of her thigh where the hose would end, and that would make the leg kind of indent. And below the ribbon, just oil her leg. And so it did look like some newfangled, strange, futuristic, idea of hosiery.
In terms of how it looked, it just wasn't practical. And then it got all over the costumes, and then it didn't work, and they're trying to grab my legs, and the whole grabbing leg thing and pulling my skirt up and getting it all over the costumes, people just complained, and it just didn't work, so we scrapped it. So they cleaned my legs up, and then we did something else.
I don't know if it really, was that visible in the film, but I knew we'd see her legs and wanted to do something, so that, thought went into everything.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
Tyrell was one of the richest industrialists in the land, and what the costume ended up being was almost a white cocoon of a dressing gown that was made in white silk and stuffed with down and totally quilted, almost like he was still in bed when he wasn't.
The bathrobe, I looked at the bathrobe I was wearing, the stitching, the fine stitching. This was done artistically. The glasses, I had to go to a special glass place to get the glasses that he wanted. I mean, detail after detail. Where the hell did he come up with this? This is all in Ridley's mind. He's a very sick man.
What's this?
Nexus 6, Roy Batty.
He was kind of a very, strong, heroic anti-hero, and or even a hero of sorts by the end of the film. I think the Marlon Brando motorcycle jacket, perhaps, just something iconic. Black leather with a high collar, I think, was an iconic look that just seemed right for him.
I think Charlie was the first one to invent skin-tight leotards. And Charles said, I thought these stretch leotards, I'm going, stretch leotards? Now, today, these are like cycling trousers or, sports gear, actually, to hold you together and also make you look a little bit better.
We fooled around a little bit with some ideas. I remember that we tried a skunky punky kind of look, but the bigger deal was that they had all these designs of different tattoos. And it was interesting because he wanted to have like a map on my body when I subtly have undressed myself. And I think it only shows in one photograph. That's the irony of it. But nice detail, though,
That's Leon, ammunition loader on intergalactic runs. He can lift 400-pound atomic loads all day and night. The only way you can hurt him is to kill him.
These replicants were designed to be, different strata of life, and so he was kind of your everyman, I think. It also, he didn't have the needs that, a lot of the other characters in the film had. I remember I went to the dentist, and I'm wearing this paper bib backed in plastic that was kind of had this funny hospital green color to it, and I thought this would be a great costume for Leon to be interrogated in, so we got the fabric and made him some hospital clothes out of that.
I just do eyes. Just eyes. Genetic design. Just eyes.
Chu was wearing something that he could go into a sub-zero freezer and work. It was something futuristic that looked like he had had it for a really long time. I mean, it was kind of all distressed and had rubber tubes going into it and patches of leather, and it was this whole coat with a heating system.
I remember going in for wardrobe fitting. They put this heavy cloak around me that was stiff as heck. I said, oh gosh, does he know what he's doing? But on the second and third, and then finally when the film, was made, it was astronomical. It was one of the best costumes I ever had. It just had that imagination of Ridley Scott.
Eddie was doing a show in town at that moment, I think, called Zoot Suit, but Eddie's hat and Zoot Suit was like this, and I thought we'd go the way we go fedora with a narrow brim. It could almost be dressed as if he was a well-to-do drug dealer, and in fact was the man who did all the dirty work for the department. The word gaff is a good name, actually.
He was a bit of a dandy. I think jewelry and piercings and a little bit over the top fabric-wise, pattern-wise. Pattern on pattern with a tie, and I found this amazing coat, and I remember thinking that would be like the crowning glory, and we cut it apart and put it back together, upside down and backward, and that was his coat.
It was not
futuristic. It was very practical. The coat was practical. The cane was practical. The hats, because it was always raining, and we knew it would be acid rain, and it was tough, and there was be a lot of stuff going on.
In a way, we were also kind of wanting to prove that it wasn't a 1940s movie, so it was different, and we didn't want everybody to be kind of in this exact same vein. So he was an individual who kind of veered off in another direction.
This is Zora. She's trained for an off-world kick murder squad. Talk about Beauty and the Beast. She's both.
I think it was Charles' idea for her to be just wearing jewels and glitter for her, snake charming act. There was a woman who came to my attention, and she made wearable art, and we had her crochet, the bikini costume.
They wanted to have these snake scales, or a semblance thereof, and what we ended up doing was doing 3 sizes of sequins, and it took 3 hours to glue them on in a given pattern that I designed. Did her body makeup and then glued those on.
It was a very pleasant experience. I mean, it just took hours and hours. There was a layer of makeup, and then there were 3 people working on me and gluing the different sequins on and the little pieces. But I would just go to sleep. It was wonderful.
The final scene in the dressing room is Ridley wanted her to go into the shower and those scales wash off. Okay, well, I'm having a hard time keeping those suckers on. So what do you do? I said it's a one-shot deal, and I used hairstyling gel to create my glue, so to speak, so that when she goes into the shower and the water hits her, they washed off.
We wanted her to be in some kind of a bra. We kind of liked the idea of her wearing something that hadn't been seen before, and so it was soft metal, it was wired, and it just kind of formed her body, and then she could just pull it off. The clear plastic raincoat is to so many people who talk to me like their favorite garment in the movie, and it came about as something practical to protect her from the broken glass. It was something that stood out, the way it was lit, and the fact that it was clear plastic. So it worked on so many levels. I think it was a great choice.
The foreskin job is Pris, a basic pleasure model, the standard item for military clubs in the outer colonies.
Ridley wanted her hair all chopped up like, a punk rocker, which was kind of happening right then. She has very fine corn silk hair, and she said her hair grows extremely slowly. And she begged us not to cut her hair, and she said she would do anything. I think that might be why she brought her own wig in, just to be armed with something.
It was just one of those really fortunate situations where we had one of the most brilliant designers, Charles Node, and we kind of just clicked and saw her in a similar way, and then he just went off and took off, and then he was using these curtain fabrics. That was the fabric that was in between the strips of sort of fake leopard skin or some kind of animal, tiger stripe or something, and it gives you absolutely no weather protection or warmth or anything, but it looks fantastic.
All along, I was kind of thinking of things that I hadn't seen before, and we did make this spandex costume for her, and instead of her wearing a bra or having darts put into the costume, we heat molded the breasts into it. The other thing I had in my mind when we were prepping the film was I just thought it'd be really cool if she was airbrushing her eye makeup on. I talked to Ridley about that, and he loved the idea, and so, it is in the film.
What's your name? Mine's J.F. Sebastian.
Sebastian was like Puck, and he was a craftsman, and he was like a tinker and a toy maker, and he had a little apron or vest with lots of little pockets and a little quilted jacket, and he just looked kind of almost storybook, like slightly elfin.
There were always a little bit of creative things that we were dealing with. There's a lot of things like all of a sudden come up with a half a dozen toys They were little people. Pick up a nose here and this and that and make his toys for him.
There were some actual toys, and then there were some actual little people that we dressed up and made up to look like toys, to look like toy soldiers, you know, put gloves on them.
Home again, jiggity jigs.
Their movements were amazing, and I think really added a lot to the film. At the time, it seemed like what Tokyo at rush hour would be like. Just masses and masses of people, you know, like filling the streets, and continual rain, lots of umbrellas, lots of different types of people all crossing and passing in the darkness. Ridley wanted the world to be a really dangerous, dark place. You know, he didn't want the police to look like your friendly cop on the beat. So what we did was we created like body armor. They were very fascist looking, and yet they had to look authentic and official, and so we created patches and a ranking system for the arms, and, you know, like a normal officer would have. But they're very, you know, they're all designed for protectiveness, you know, like body armor.
I had a crew of like 40 makeup and hair to help me out, because we had those huge scenes with all this background people, and really decided you wanted the Asians to have a little different look, and so I created a blue foundation, a light blue foundation that was Asian blue. I still have a jar of it someplace over in my bag somewhere.
We were working with extras casting and getting people with the most interesting faces, and Ridley wanted a lot of Asian people. You know, it was a situation where there was acid rain, so people had umbrellas and they had large hats. We thought there would be, you know, a lot of Asian immigrants, and so we kind of fell back on the look of a coolie hat. We actually just went to different farmers markets and Pier 1 and just got lots of baskets and wrapped people's heads and made hats out of the baskets. The poor people were you know, almost like homeless people wearing rags that were distressed and overdyed, and so, you know, there were hundreds and hundreds of those costumes. Also, Ridley, I think one of the things he might have talked about at that time was having umbrellas where the shaft would light up, because everybody would be kind of almost living under their umbrella because of the constant acid rain. It just gave them a way of shedding light on the world. Early on, when Charles and I were doing sketches, we incorporated hairstyles. And we thought if the clothes were 1940s, or using that as a takeoff point, maybe the hair would be as well. And yet we did these very strange kind of pompadours, or just little knots in the front of the hair on the fashionable female extras.
In fashion, you call it fashion forward. It was a combination of the future and retro. And that's the way a lot of fashion is done. And that's one of the reasons I thought, gee, this would be great for the fashion magazines.
Fashion designers watch film a lot. They're very influenced by certain kinds of movie. I think Charlie's was an influence on fashion, definitely.
Just being a part of it, you know, I was happy to be there every day. I was excited and, you know, couldn't do enough. When it ended, I was a bit bereft. It was the most creative thing that I had ever done.
Hi, I'm Mike Fenton, and I was the casting director on Blade Runner. You're going to see 2 film tests of actresses who we were considering for the film. One is Nina Axelrod, and the other is Stacey Nelkin. In addition, we tested Sean Young and Daryl Hannah. Unfortunately, the audio portion of their tests has been lost. I hope you enjoy them, and this is what we do in Hollywood to determine who is going to get a role.
I really don't remember having an initial call. I just remember going in and meeting Ridley. And I remember, it's also vivid, it's 25 years ago. I remember sitting in the chair, and it was so important to me. I wanted to connect with him. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I was really serious about this. I felt a really deep connection with the material. And the entire concept of getting to play this character who had an entire lifetime of memories and believed in the truth of her life, only to discover that that was a lie. And not only had she had no life, but she'd actually only been in existence for it was a very, very short period of time. And then beyond that was not even a human being, but was robotic in nature. It slayed me. It slayed me. It was like, for me, that was just like the ultimate opportunity as an actress. It was the most juiciest, profound, amazing challenge.
Marker? Action.
What do you want?
I've come to help you out.
Help me out? I've got as much help as I need. Thanks anyway.
Oh, well, you know, it's possible you need more help than you've got.
Oh.
You know, Mr. Deckard, there's two reasons a man rejects help. Either he's so superb at what he does that he doesn't need it, or sometimes he's so insecure that he can't admit it.
Well, that makes me an asshole either way. So the answer's still no.
I don't know why he told you what he did.
What?
Tyrell, I don't know why he told you what he did.
Oh, come in.
Well, what did you ask him?
It wasn't possible.
In your time.
You and your father?
Yeah.
Did you cry when he died?
Yeah, I cried.
That's another thing I can't do. Something was missing, wasn't it? I don't have anything to compare it to. I need you to tell me. I wasn't very good, was I?
Is that why you left? It wasn't you. It was me.
Am I very different?
Yeah.
How?
Stand up. Now, you kiss me.
I can't rely on my memory to...
So say what I say. Kiss me.
Kiss me.
My eyes.
Kiss my eyes.
I want you. Again.
I want you. Bite me.
You know, I remember my friend Nina Axelrod, who screen tested for the part of Rachel. And I came in to screen test for Pris. She was one of the replicants, manipulative, you know, seemingly very innocent and naive and frail, but she wasn't that at all. She was extremely manipulative and knew what she was doing. And then in the end, you see when she kicks Harrison Ford's butt, figuratively and literally, that was, you know, she had this inner power, but she could, on the surface, get by, as everybody had to, with pretending to be very innocent and vulnerable.
Parker?
Hey! Hey! You dropped your bag! How'd you get in here?
The door was locked. I'm lost.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you. What's your name?
Pris.
Mine's J.F. Sebastian.
Hi.
Hi. Well, where were you going? Home?
I don't have one.
Oh.
Scared each other pretty good, didn't we?
Oh, we sure did.
I'm hungry, JF.
Yeah, well, I've got stuff. I mean, if you want to come in my place.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Okay. Come on.
Jordan Cronenweth, whom Ridley Scott hired to be the director of photography on Blade Runner, was one of the greatest cinematographers of our modern age.
I think Jordan was one that represented probably one of the best of the best. And Jordan is one of the most important cameramen in Hollywood at that point.
Well, we all paint with light, but he was one of the grand masters, as far as I'm concerned.
He was born here in California in 1935, and when Jordan came to working age, worked as an assistant at the lab, you know, in Columbia. I think Columbia was doing a Western and was short of camera assistants, and so he left the lab, his summer job, and went and worked as a camera assistant, and then never went back to school.
When I met him at the American Film Institute, we clicked as friends immediately because we were both very passionate about photography.
He'd even come out of that Connie Hall, Haxel Wexler school where I think Jordan had probably been an operator.
Jordan and he struck up a relationship and a friendship, and then went on to, you know, collaborate on the next 10 movies that Conrad did. And then I believe that it was a picture that Conrad was offered that he turned down and recommended Jordan, and Jordan went on to shoot that and started his career as a cinematographer.
I'll tell you, one of the most amazing things that I remember about Jordan was on Cutter's Way. I was the AFI intern and trying to be, a fly on the wall. And he said, put a double in that light. And so I put a double in. And then he said, now put a single in. And he said, put a single in the light. And he turned to me and he said, Ernie, what do you think? A double or a single? You could have knocked me over with a leaf. I was just floored that this man would ask me what I thought about lighting his set. So I said, well, I think you ought to put a double in it. He said, absolutely right. Put a double in it.
Ridley had said that he wanted the overall look of this film to be dark, and he meant that literally. In other words, we're going to bring down the house lights as much as we can.
Jordan would put quite a lot of light on and then crush it down. And he absolutely understood the layers and layers of light on big setups. And he was nearly wide open all the time, so the corners don't go black, but actually you have layers and layers and layers of light which you can actually crush, and still one of the best negatives.
He was a fan of Kodak's fast film, not necessarily wanting to push it, but the faster the film got, the more fun he had with. It always seemed like, how can we shoot this with no light?
He said, why don't we just deduct light? And I thought, well, that sounds like a great idea because I'm a grip, and now I'm going to be able to do a lot of lighting and, basically just putting big blacks up on over the side and just taking out the light.
His favorite quote of mine was, it's not what you light, it's what you don't light that separates you from everyone else. So it's like the lack of overlighting, negative sources, negative fields, and good contrast.
I could vision him sitting there and staring through the camera, because Jordan would just hang in there and he would look through the camera until it just seemed right.
He was never in a hurry. Let's look at what we have and how do we make it better. And he was brilliant at that.
But he was one of the most tenacious and stubborn men I've ever known. And I mean that in a positive way, because he would fight to keep his imagery as sharp and as vital as he could up until the last minute when, he gave the set over to the director.
Hey, look, two creative people in one eyepiece. Come on, guys. Something's going to happen.
He's not the quickest person in the world, but usually the best aren't. And when I'm throwing up a shot of a room which is the size of this building, it's going to take time to light it. Otherwise, I'm going to hate it. So I've actually got to be patient, and I understand that.
The old saying goes that it's not the time it takes to takes the takes that takes the time. It's the time between the takes that takes the time.
Jordan had almost like a Vermeerish type of approach to light. Everything was sourced interestingly. There were deep pools of darkness, and there was always a very, very complicated palette. And it certainly wasn't just like a flat, high-key, overall wash of light as so many other films are. He really knew what he was doing.
You know what? I'll tell you the secret. Is a large source as close to your subject as possible. Right on the sideline, right out of frame. And then you have all that wraparound. See, so you have a fill and a key all from one source.
People will say, well, so-and-so is a really good cameraman, but he really can't light women. Jordan is a really good cameraman, but he could light women, he could light anything.
I remember we were shooting at Tyrell's office, the scene that preceded the Voight Kampf scene, when Rachel makes her entrance. And here's this incredible scene of art direction and light, and this beautiful, beautiful woman with the most elegant skin. And she walks in this beautiful light, and then the moment before she stops, there's this shadow that she walks through, just a tiny little shadow bar, which I thought he added that as we were lighting the shot. And he looked at me and just gave me a little wink when he did that. And I knew exactly what he meant. You know, it was like, yeah, this is it. This is like the cream in the coffee, as he used to say.
I think that he preferred the light to be invisible and to be natural and to come from natural places and not be contrived. Blade Runner, of course, is an exception to that because it was a world that was not real to start with. And so it introduced, of course, much more dramatic and progressive lighting sources than we were all used to before.
One of the things that he did learn on Blade Runner was you don't have to have an excuse for a light coming from somewhere. The light is there. And when you really look at it in real life, light's coming from everywhere. And in fact, the first time we were in Deckard's apartment, during a rehearsal, actually Ridley had his eye on the camera, and Jordan had told me, you know, every like 20, 30 seconds, have one of the guys swing a xenon through the window.
And then Deckard's guys took him and lit him and, you know, and put him in position and just swished him through the set. And God, Ridley's seen that and he goes, fuck me.
And Jordan said, well, you know, it's a shaft of light coming through. And Jordan said, have him do it again while we were all standing up. And he went through again and hit all pictures on the piano, hit everything. Well, Ridley said, I like that. Let's use it.
And then that was the beginning of the Xeons. From that time on, the Xeons were everywhere.
A lot of people that know Blade Runner do not believe that we had just 4 1-kilowatt xenon searchlights.
If you look at a lot of his movies, obviously the camera moves quite a bit, but it's always motivated. Our medium's storytelling, so we're advancing the story, and I think that he never wanted to interfere with that. He only wanted to enhance the experience, add content through light and through composition and through camera movement, if and when it needed to be moved.
He was such a meticulous artist and would constantly run the setups through his head and talk about them with me. And Jordan would go, oh my God, I screwed that up or this up.
My father was like every artist. He was never happy with anything until years and years later, and then would kind of go back and watch something and then appreciate his own accomplishment finally after he got through the pain and suffering of what didn't work.
He was such a taskmaster on himself, but you know, I would just look at him and I'd say, you're so full of shit, this stuff is just landmark. No one has ever made a film that looks like this.
Looking back on it, Jordan was very proud of what we had done. Later, the film got ignored at Oscar time, which was really sad.
The divine injustice of its lack of recognition by the Academy and by the ASC at that time was just frightening.
He was a brilliant, brilliant cameraman, and I think he got screwed not being nominated for an Academy Award. There's no two ways about it.
But in Jordan's case, he won the BAFTA, which is the English Academy Award for cinematography on Blade Runner, which was well deserved.
Interesting, BAFTA, it's the opposite way that our Academy works. You know, that's why often you hear when people get nominated here, it's all about the nomination and not so much the award. Of course, everybody wants the award, but there it's your peers that actually decide that. So it meant a lot. It was nice validation for, you know, an accomplishment.
Do you know when He won the BAFTA. It was the middle of the night, and he called me from England. He called me from England and said, "We've won the BAFTA. We've won the BAFTA." And he included me as a partner in that. And I was stunned at his generosity. I learned a lot from that man.
He was comfortable enough as an artist and as a professional that he looked at sharing his knowledge as a gift that he could give to other people.
You know what? I tell you something. All your good photographers are sharers. They don't have any secrets because they know there's no secrets.
He shared everything with everybody who was interested. If somebody was interested in lighting or cinematography, he was there for them.
I came in toward the end. There were about 4 weeks left to go to do one shot, one night. It was the car going through the tunnel, the 3rd Street tunnel, downtown, with the white tile walls and everything. And Ridley liked what I did and kept me for the rest of the show. And Jordan, one of the most wonderful human beings I've ever known, was very generous, and he just said, "Ridley likes your stuff, go out and do it." He just sort of gave me a free hand to do. I knew what filtration, I knew what they were doing with smoke, and had a sense of some of the lighting setups. So I was able to replicate Jordan's work very easily.
He didn't feel like he had any mysterious secrets or exposure secrets or tricks that for a long time people kept to themselves. And so there's a whole array of us that grew up under his tutelage that are all shooting, working cinematographers now, all in the ASC. Everybody, it seems, that was fortunate enough to work with him certainly gained a lot by that experience.
One of the things I learned from Jordan is, if you think of something at take 3 or 4 that you want to change, or you get an idea, I mean, creativity is a linear process. And let's face it, a creative mind doesn't stop creating just because you start shooting take 1 or take 5. And if, Jordan thought of something that he wanted to do after the first couple of camera takes, he did it, and he threw it in. It's really funny. One of the second ADs on Blade Runner called me 2 or 3 years after the movie and said, "Ernie, I'm working on a music video, and the director loves Blade Runner, and he wants this music video to look like Blade Runner, so he wants to know what kind of film it was shot on." So I said, well, 5247, But, shooting with the same film stock is not going to reproduce that look. But certain directors like Phil Joannou, and David Fancher, they knew what was going on, and they wanted to work with Jordan, of course, and did on a number of projects.
His work was beautiful. It was different on many occasions. It was all different from each one to the next. And I've never seen a movie that he made that wasn't an extraordinarily looking movie.
He wasn't predictable. You couldn't say, oh, this is what he does. What he does was constantly reinvent himself and do different things. And I think that is one of the most amazing things about his artistry, is that you couldn't define him by one movie or by one scene or by one conversation.
For a number of years, my father had suffered from a disease that was unknown at the time, and it put him in a physical, mentally perfectly clear. Physically, it drained him.
Jordan had really got it down. I mean, he, and then his body gave out. But he finally, he figured it out, and his body lost it, yeah.
He was misdiagnosed, and the medication he was taking was the exact opposite of what he should have been taking for what was really wrong with him.
In the end, when we finally discovered what it was, and And embarrassingly, it wasn't a doctor that discovered it. They were at a cocktail party, 6 months after Blade Runner, and someone inadvertently said, "How long has your husband had Parkinson's disease?" And she was like, "No, of course, he's got MS." She said, "Oh no, he's got Parkinson's." I think they went to a neurologist that week, and he got back about 80% of his mobility and went on to do 5 or 6 more features.
He dealt with it so evenly, and he would joke about it. And like I said, he's just a kind and gentle man, and he didn't let his physical problems interfere with his art.
You could never feel sorry for yourself or let your fatigue or your duress come into play when you saw someone that had so many obstacles to overcome that never ever lost focus, compromised shots, let integrity drop. It was always about the shot till the end when they called route.
But I don't know how he did it. I have no idea how he survived. It's a testament to willpower and durability and the inner strength of a human being.
In the end, my father eventually succumbed to Parkinson's disease. And he was in intensive care for months and then never fully recovered from that.
I was kind of embarrassed with myself because I didn't want to be there. I knew I should be there. It was one of those things where I knew I should be there and I should show my respect, but he was in such sad shape that I don't know if he would have wanted me there. And I tell you,
He just didn't wake up after Thanksgiving one day. And so I think that at some point the burden was too much, and the strength it took to fight it was too much, and he didn't.
As a cinematographer, Jordan's passing was a huge loss to our community. He was the best of us.
I think today he empowers young cinematographers and old cinematographers that want to reflect back on another master of the craft, whether it was a commercial or a music video or a concert movie or a film. And I think that he leaves a lasting lesson to just be observant to what goes on naturally around us and love light and watch it and be it, feel it, and it'll come across.